The governor says about the doom loop. He always brings up the doom loop. There's a reason that it's there. It's happening. I've seen it happen. My last 3 years out as a paramedic captain, the crime has 100% increased. The shootings were rampant. I can't even count how many times I went to multiple shooting calls. The homeless are everywhere. The crime, the boarding up of businesses, the closing down of businesses. They're just breaking in. I've walked into a Walgreens before and seen people blatantly put stuff in a bag and walk out, and there's nothing you can do to them. Those things are not getting reported. You don't hear about that.
Hello and welcome to Bay Area Innovators. I'm your host, Steve Espas. Today we are joined by Rafael Gordon. Rafael was born and raised in San Francisco and has been a paramedic with the San Francisco Fire Department for 30 years. He is also a property manager and nutrition expert. Our discussion today will focus on crime and housing issues that plague this great American city. Rafael, welcome to our program.
Steve, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great having you here. Well, we want to talk about San Francisco and crime. There's a lot of reports talking about how San Francisco's crime is out of control, how there's theft happening, there's all these videos that go viral with people stealing stuff on the streets, homeless out of control. What do you see on the street?
So I think before I answer that, I'd like to give it a little context. I was born and raised in San Francisco. I went to school there up until my second year of college. I also worked in the fire department and on private ambulances for 30 years. So I have a very unique view as opposed to someone who's going to tell you that it's all camera tricks and all that. The crime has 100% increased. And I don't mean, what I mean, it's definitely increased from what I saw back in the 70s, 80s, 90s until now. Yes, can they make it look worse when there are videos? Sure. But the fact is that, it's increased, and not only the violent crime, but as we saw during the pandemic, I can give you an example that during the pandemic, we didn't have a lot of tourists coming into San Francisco, so the criminals reverted to breaking into people's garages and stealing bikes. So that opportunity to break into people's cars at the beaches or at restaurants, typically what happens is they know they're coming in from the airport, they stop and grab something to eat, or they go to the beach or whatever. Boom, they'll take everything, and it takes minutes. In the property that I manage in San Francisco, on 4 or 5 different occasions, they broke into our building, tried to steal bikes. They weren't able to. They broke into cars in our garages. It's all on video. That wasn't happening prior to the pandemic. So yeah, there's definitely an increase. Violent crime is definitely on the up. If you looked at video of downtown 10 years ago versus now, it looks like a third world country now. When I first started as a paramedic, we would get a lot of heroin overdoses. Now it's fentanyl, and fentanyl is 10 to 20 times more lethal than heroin. So if you don't have the money to purchase the drugs, you're going to definitely have to commit crimes to get that money to purchase those drugs.
Now, you've been a firefighter and you've been a paramedic.
Mm-hmm.
Please tell us some of the things you have seen during your job of duty.
So I saw multiple different things. For many years, I was also not only on the ambulance in the streets of San Francisco, I was detailed out to the airport for a long period of time. But as far as the crime, my last 3 years out as a paramedic captain, so I went to all 4 quadrants of the city. There's 4 paramedic captains. So we get to see different crimes in different areas. The violence you'll see mostly downtown in the Mission District, and the robberies you'll see in the outskirts, not as much as the violence. But violence and the shootings were rampant. We get a lot of those. I can't even count how many times I went to multiple shooting calls. And I remember this one where this one group in the Western Addition, a bunch of them got shot. I think there was 4 or 5 of them that got shot because they were saying something bad on Facebook about another group in Oakland. So the group in Oakland came up and shot up a bunch of people in the Western Addition. So that's just one example. There's so many of those. Just being a resident for so long, you could just walk down the street and see it. In my neighborhood in the Richmond district, it's everywhere. The homeless are everywhere. The crime, the boarding up of businesses, the closing down of businesses. They're just breaking in. I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a CVS at 32nd and Clement. A bunch of thugs backed their vehicle into it, broke into the place at night and stole stuff from the CVS. Those things are not getting reported, though. You don't hear about that.
Why are the residents reluctant to report some of the crimes?
And I think that's a function of, over time, the police are not taking reports. They're not documenting what's happening. And I don't blame that on the police. I blame that on that former DA that we had, Chesaboudin. He had this thing that sounds really good. He called it restorative justice, but it became a turnstile. The or the jail system became a turnstile. They'd arrest them, and by the time the sun came up, they were out. So I think the residents, like myself, were frustrated because nothing was happening. And they would tell us, nothing's going to happen. They broke into our house. There's a video of a guy with a billy club breaking into cars in our garage area, and the cops were like, they're not going to do anything. There's not, simply, we're not going to arrest people like that. They don't arrest people for breaking into cars because most of the time they're gone anyway. But they're not going to invest the resources into finding somebody that just broke into a car and stole stuff. It's just not going to happen.
Well, so we're going to now get into why this happens. You already mentioned the former district attorney.
Yeah.
What else do you see that there's a reason behind this increasing crime and theft?
So when you don't prosecute crime, then you're inviting it. I think that actions must have consequences. And it's like with a child. If a child keeps pushing you and you don't discipline that child, they're going to keep doing it. If a criminal knows that he can commit a crime and he's not going to get in trouble or go to jail for it, well, you've incentivized it. And not only is that one criminal going to do it, but other people that see that example are going to also come in and commit more crimes. They're not punishing them.
So that's pretty common sense, you would think. Now, why do these politicians get into positions like Chesaboudin? Why do people vote for them? What's the incentive for them to vote for someone that creates these kind of policies?
That's a great question. And so I've asked people before, why did you vote for this guy, Chesaboudin? And some of the answers I got were just ridiculous. Oh, he's part of the Boudin family. He was great. He's got a great name. He's a good-looking guy. Or this. I go, do you understand who his parents were? His parents were part of the Weather Underground. His parents were in jail for killing police officers. This guy has an agenda, and his agenda is against police officers. There's a reason that he was recalled. It's very hard to recall a DA, but he was recalled overwhelmingly. So I believe that people that vote are not educated and they didn't do their homework on who they're voting for. If you really listen to what he was saying, he was telling you what he was going to do. You have to look up what restorative justice means and see what his track record was. And people didn't do that. So that's a problem. If we don't know who we're voting for, we're going to be voting in the wrong problem. And so people vote. They vote for the letter after him. Oh, if he's a Democrat, we're going to vote for him, or he's a whatever. That's the reason. They didn't do their homework on who this guy really is.
I'm going to read you a quote that I got here. I wanted you to comment on it and see what you think about it. So this is from John Chachas. He's the CEO of Gump. Gump is this retail store in San Francisco, 166 years old store, retail store. He actually wrote an open letter to the governor, Governor Newsom, the mayor, and the board of supervisors, and he published it in the Chronicle, as a paid ad. He paid for it. Basically, he's saying that San Francisco now suffers from a tyranny of the minority, behavior and actions of the few that jeopardize the livelihood of the many. The ramifications of the COVID policies advising people to abandon their offices are only beginning to be understood. Equally devastating have been a litany of destructive San Francisco strategies, including allowing the homeless to occupy our sidewalks, to openly distribute and use illegal drugs, to harass the public, and to defile the city streets. So, again, you live in San Francisco, you see what happens. Is this guy right, or how far off is he?
He's not off at all. I think he hit a bullseye with that one. The question is like, what do we do now? He hit it. There's no question, and I'm not debating what he's saying. Is what do we do now? I had mentioned to you earlier, I finally, the COVID pandemic was what was my springboard to get out of California, and I moved to Idaho because it was, in my opinion, mismanaged completely the pandemic. People say, oh, he saved lives. No, he didn't. He's telling you to not go to restaurants and to stay at home and be masked while he's at a restaurant, one of the most expensive restaurants in the country, talking to lobbyists. So I think Joe Rogan said it best, is that Governor Newsom is a stone-cold, narrative-driven politician. I don't even look at him as a human being, to be honest with you. He lies through his teeth. He was the mayor of San Francisco when I was working there, and nothing has changed. It's just gotten worse. I can't imagine this guy got elected a second time, how that happened. But the Gump CEO is correct. There are many big businesses leaving San Francisco, and with that, they take their taxes with them, which is why they threatened to implement that policy where Newsom was saying, we're going to tax them for 10 years, anybody who made a certain amount of money. That's unconstitutional and communistic at best, right? They're not going to do that, but that's what they were threatening to do. When these businesses leave, they take their money with them. And then, so what happens? How do we pay? Like this recent thing when he wants to pay for illegal immigrants for their medical bills, if they give them Medi-Cal. How do we pay for that? How? I mean, I don't have the answer to that.
Well, speaking of the governor and the policies, and a lot of the businesses are leaving San Francisco.
Sure.
What do you think is the number or the main reason? Is it crime, or is it the policies, or why are they leaving?
I think it's a multifold answer. Certainly crime is going to do it. But the authoritarian lockdowns from COVID did it, and then there's so many regulations that get put into place that just drive businesses out. So if you have a big business that knows they can go to another state and pay less taxes, they're going to provide you with a better service rather than staying here and having to pay and pay and pay, no matter what. They're constantly being bombarded with taxes and regulations. So yeah, it's not only the crime. The crime definitely. I mean, look at Walgreens. I love their answer for Walgreens. Oh, it's not that, it's not because of the crime. It is because of the crime. I've walked into a Walgreens before and seen people blatantly put stuff in a bag and walk out, and there's nothing you can do to them. Once again, actions and consequences. There's no consequences. So I don't blame people for leaving.
Yeah, there's a lot of those videos online, and I'm sure many people wonder if those are real or if those are very unique or very rare cases. But from what you're saying, they're not rare, right?
It's not rare. It's not rare at all. The lie that the governor says about the doom loop. He always brings up the doom loop, the Fox News doom loop. There's a reason that it's there. It's happening. I've seen it happen. Many of us will attest to that. And for him to go on and say that it's not happening and that crime is down is an outright lie.
Well, next I want to ask you about your change of careers. You went from being a firefighter into property management. Please tell us about your change, and what do you see as far as policies in the housing industry?
So after I retired, I manage property. I don't own the property that I manage. It's owned by my dad and his brother. So my brothers and my dad and his brother. So my brothers and I manage the property. And so we were given the task to take care of it for them. And it's the same thing as with businesses, the regulations, the rules that come out that cost us a lot of money, the rent control. There's no more, the tenants really have way more control than the owners do, because they have organizations that support them, and we have to pay to be part of our board, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we have tenants that have been with us for many, many, many years. We enjoy a very good relationship with our tenants. And I wanted to address something I think I mentioned to you in the last interview I did. I got a lot of comments on YouTube about, all he has to do is drop the rent. Well, it doesn't work that way. When you drop rent because of rent control, you've now significantly reduced the property value. And it doesn't work both ways. I can't increase rent when I want to. I can drop it as much as I want. I can just say, hey, take it for free. But we're a business. It's still a business. I think the misconception that owning property, I'm there to take care, just to provide housing for people. It goes both ways. We provide housing, but at the same time, we have to make money doing it. We're not getting rich doing it, but my dad and his family came from Burma. They came here as refugees, and started with nothing. My dad said I had $6 in my pocket when he came here in the 50s. And slowly, slowly, he put his nickels and dimes together with his brother, and they did good, you know? Are they filthy rich? Absolutely not. But they're doing good. They're able to provide for their families. So regulations that come through, all of a sudden, like there's this new thing that's coming out that it's called a pillow alarm test. Have you heard of that?
No.
Pillow alarm test is any structure that has 3 or more units has to have a smoke alarm in each bedroom that can be heard at the pillow level at 70 or 72 decibels. So now with our units, it's going to cost us about $150,000 to do that, and it's mandatory. We have a good system in place, but now it has to change because they have regulations to do it. Mandatory regulations. That there was a seismic retrofit that came out that we had to retrofit the building, $120,000. Now we do it because it's mandated.
If you don't do it, you can't rent
They'll
it
shut us
anymore.
down,
Yeah.
right? Rent is controlled, so we cannot increase rent based on what we wanted or the market. So the CPI goes up. We can raise it a little bit each year. Sometimes we don't. We didn't raise it for 2 years during the pandemic because we knew people were struggling, you know? There's a big difference between a building like ours that are run by us versus a building that is run by a big management company. You call me and say I have a leak, you're going to hear from us within an hour or two. It's not like that in those big that big apartments that are run by big management companies.
Speaking of tenants' rights, why do you think that tenant advocacy groups are so powerful?
There's more tenants than owners, so it makes sense, all right? And so they get these advocacy groups and they make rules that are punitive to the owners. And you know, we're not bad. We're not the big bad wolf that they make us out to be. They'll say, oh, these landlords, they're greedy and they want to get as much as possible. I have a tenant who's a World War II vet. He's 97 years old. He's been in that building for 50 years before my father and brother bought it. And he's paying a third of what his rent is. And that's cool because we love the guy. You know what I mean? He's a vet. He served our country. So once you get locked into that low rate, which is why we don't reduce the rent just to because what happens is the market may go down. We're not going to reduce the rent because when the market goes up, we can't increase it. So we stay neutral with it, right? Eventually it's going up as it is now. But during the pandemic, it went down. But these advocacy groups, they make it very difficult to evict tenants unless they're not paying. It's a nightmare. So a lot of them have that control.
But again, why do they have so much power with the government? Because they're not the ones creating the policies. It has to be the city that creates the policies, right?
Yeah, so the advocacy groups have to push the politicians, and the more of them that they are, the more influential they are. It's kind of like the bike coalition. Mm-hmm. The bike coalition in San Francisco is one of the most powerful advocacy groups in the entire city. So they can push the narrative and drive change because they're very powerful and they have an ear. And maybe they're also greasing the politicians. I don't know if they're doing that or not, but it could be.
Talk to us about some of the solutions that you see that can improve the city, both on a housing level and on crime. What is it people can do to improve the situation?
You've got to vote the right way. We have to vote in the right people. Since they're the ones that control the laws, there's no way unless anarchy takes over, which is not going to happen, and nor do I advocate for that, but we have to bring in the right people, sensible people, centrist. I'm not saying go far right or far left, but we're so far left in San Francisco that it's no one's speaking for the average person. So if you were considered a liberal back in the 60s and 70s, you are now considered a far right-wing extremist by these progressive types that are running the city right now. I'll give you an example. The vacancy tax that just took place 2 days ago, it was brought on by a guy named Dean Preston. He was supervisor in District 5. He is a democratic socialist. Okay, he admits it. That vacancy tax will tax any building with more than 3 units if they're vacant after 6 months, anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a year for a vacant unit. So the regulations are authoritarian, And so we cannot have politicians like that don't have the best interest of everybody. So that's where we start. Now, the other part is the policing needs to get better. And I'm not talking about the police force themselves. I'm talking about the people that make the decision on who gets arrested and who gets prosecuted. Because the police can do their job all day long, but the minute the DA says we're not prosecuting that guy, well, those guys just wasted their time.
Yeah, you know, the progressive policies seem to move towards the socialist system.
Sure.
And the question is, you know, people have seen Eastern Europe fall in '89.
Yeah.
You know, most of the communist countries and socialist countries' systems, they collapsed because it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Why is it growing now in the U.S. after over 20 years after falling in Europe?
Throughout time and history, they're always going to say the same thing, that they think they can do it better. You look at Venezuela, you look at every other European country that tried socialism, it doesn't work because eventually you run out of other people's money, right? I mean, there's no other best way to put it. Have you ever heard of a guy named Yuri Bezmenov?
That sounds familiar.
Okay, look him up. I encourage everybody to Google him and do a YouTube search on him. And he talked about...
Is it a Russian who defected?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was a KGB agent
Yeah.
that defected. What an interesting piece he did in 1983. He's dead now. And he said that he talked about ideological subversion and the 4 steps to get there. And now we're in that 4th step, which is the step of normalization. Everything's normal now. You talk to people and they will say things that you go, I can't believe you just said that. You know, socialist ideology takes from you and me and gives to other people, but when you and me finally say, hey, we're not going to do that, then what happens? Well, whose money are you going to use to pay for everybody? Doesn't work. So then you're going to end up in a big problem, which is why they, you know, eventually it'll sound a little conspiratorial, but, you know, the gun. Why is it in states like California, they're constantly talking about taking your guns away? Constantly. Gun control, gun control, gun control. I live in Idaho. We are a 2A state. Yeah, we can have guns. Yes, there's a background check for sure. They'll tell you there isn't, but I can tell you there is. So, you know, everything's in the manipulation of words. The manipulation of words is beautiful, and the politicians use it great. So, for instance, there was an interview with Jon Stewart. You know, he was a late night. He used to be a late night host, and he with vitriol was talking about how guns are killing children and you know, the gun control and it's killing babies. What he didn't tell you, I wish I was that one in that interview, I would have told him, I go, well, it's 85% of the children that are getting killed are children that are between 16 and 19 years old that are part of gang communities. It's not the 4 and 5-year-olds. But how do you pull at heartstrings? You use the word babies and children, and that's what he did. And everything's in the narrative, everything.
Rafael, thank you for your time. I know you've also been involved with some other innovations on your own as far as fitness. Please talk to us what else you're doing to help people improve their health.
I got into nutrition and helping people with their nutrition because as I was leaving the fire department, I saw that people weren't eating healthy and they were putting on a lot of weight and hormones got messed up. So I did some nutrition coaching for a while. I've now hooked up with a guy, a friend of mine in Idaho, Corky Thorson, and he's an IFBB pro. He's 71 years old and he's amazing. So what we've decided to do is start a group coaching business where we'll be doing most of it online, digitally, reaching out to men and women in their 40s and above, getting them to optimize their nutrition, their fitness, their mindset, as well as, you know, getting them their labs tested and all that. Because let's face it, right now, if you go to your doctor, you have high cholesterol, they're going to tell you to go on a statin. Well, we believe that in many cases, we don't really need to do that. I'm not a doctor, I'll admit that, but I know by personal experience that when you change your nutrition, your fitness, and your lifestyle habits, like, you know, cutting out the drinking and stuff, you can really change the profile of your health. So that's what we're doing.
So is nutrition, weight management?
I mean, with nutrition, weight management comes. So it's nutrition, fitness, and mindset. You know, you can't fix a problem in the same mindset that it was created. So if somebody's addicted to a food or addicted to a substance, you have to switch their mindset up.
How do you do that?
You just got to work on that person and show them what's right and not be afraid to look at somebody in the eye and say, you know what, that alcohol is really not helping you. Going to bed and eating 10 Oreo cookies and a bowl of ice cream is not helping you. So that's how and show them. What I do is I show them what I went through. I can show you my labs and how I looked 5 or 6 years ago versus what it is now, and I didn't take one medicine to change it. It was all done through getting up earlier, focusing on a more positive mindset, and kind of what you guys do with Falun Gong stuff is meditation and gratitude. Once you show somebody how to be grateful and use gratitude as a springboard to your next goal, everything changes.
Rafael, thank you so much for your time. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.